the door to the past. That night, as the flickering firelight illuminated his weathered face, William clutched the letter as if letting it go would shatter the fragile strand of hope he had left. Sleep eluded him. His gaze remained fixed on the smudged, faded lines of the letter. His trembling hands gently ran over the frayed edges of the paper, cherishing every torn corner as though it were a piece of precious treasure. Memories surged forth unbidden. The image of his young son with bright eyes and an innocent smile vividly appeared in his mind. "When was the last time I saw him? The war, the chaos, and then I lost him," he murmured, his voice hoarse with emotion. The young man seated nearby silently observed William. He saw the fragility in the old man's posture, but also noticed the faint glimmer of determination in his eyes. "Sir, I will help you. We will find him," he said softly, breaking the stillness in the small room. William looked up, his eyes red with emotion. "Thank you, young man. In this life, I never thought I'd meet someone willing to help me selflessly," he replied, his voice trembling with gratitude. The challenging journey. The next morning, their journey began. The address in the letter led them to a remote village deep in the mountains, where winding roads stretched like veins across the rugged terrain. The old, rickety bus they boarded swayed and rattled over the uneven roads. William huddled in a corner seat, his wooden cane resting beside him, his gaze drifting absently out the dusty window. Occasionally, his raspy cough drew a few glances from fellow passengers, but none spoke. When the bus reached a particularly muddy stretch of road, it ground to a halt. The driver announced that passengers would need to disembark and walk part of the way, as the vehicle could not proceed. William stared at the path ahead, thick with sticky mud and dotted with large puddles, and let out a soft sigh. The young man quickly stepped forward to assist him off the bus, his eyes filled with resolve. "We'll get through this, Mr. William," he said firmly. William's heavy steps left deep imprints in the mud. His worn and tattered shoes offered little protection against the icy cold water. Yet he uttered no complaints. He walked silently, his gaze fixed resolutely on the path ahead. The humiliation at the roadside eatery. They stopped at a roadside eatery to rest and have a meal. William entered with a weary gait, his coat stained with mud and dirt. Curious and scrutinizing eyes quickly turned toward him. "Just let me sit for a while," he murmured to the young man accompanying him. The owner of the eatery approached, looking William up and down. "Old man, do you even have money?" The brusque voice shattered the silence in the room. William hesitated, his trembling hands fumbling in his coat pocket for a few crumpled bills. He placed them on the table, his gaze averted, avoiding the piercing stares. The owner sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "These days, even the poor think they can dine like the rich." Laughter erupted around the room, echoing mockingly. A few patrons pointed fingers, whispering snide remarks to one another. William lowered his head, gripping his wooden cane tightly. Humiliation burned through him like a wildfire, scorching his dignity. Unable to hold back, the young man accompanying him raised his voice. "This man is honorable. You have no right to treat him this way." But his words did little to shift the atmosphere. The disdainful laughter continued unabated. William rose to his feet, his steps slow but resolute. Though his back was hunched with age and weariness, his demeanor held a quiet dignity. Without a word, he left the eatery, leaving behind the scornful gazes and jeering laughter that followed him out the door. A spark of hope within. As they stepped out of the eatery, William felt the weight on his shoulders grow heavier, yet deep within, a small flame of hope continued to flicker. "I've endured so much humiliation to get this far. If I can find my son, it will all be worth it," he thought. The young man walking beside him glanced at William, his eyes filled with compassion. "Mr. William, don't let those words discourage you. We still have a long way ahead, but I believe that with your perseverance, we'll find what we're looking for." William nodded slightly, a weary but warm smile spreading across his face. "You're right. As long as we don't give up, hope will light the way," he said, his hoarse voice brimming with determination. Expanded segment. The harsh truth. The silent village. When William and the young man arrived at the village, they were enveloped by an eerie stillness. The narrow dirt paths flanked by rows of bamboo, casting long shadows, seemed to lead into a place forgotten by time. William looked around, sensing the hesitant glances of the villagers who seemed to avoid their gaze. He hesitated to ask questions right away, choosing instead to quietly observe, his heart heavy with unease. Slowly, he began to approach people, his voice trembling with hope. "Do you know my son? He lived here once, a long time ago." But most replies were only headshakes, with some villagers not even bothering to respond. Their eyes were filled with suspicion, as if William were a wandering beggar or an outsider bringing unwelcome trouble. The young man tried to intervene, speaking in a calm and respectful tone. "We're only here to ask about a family member. Any information would be deeply appreciated." Yet, the villagers remained distant, their guarded expressions unchanged. Faint glimmers of connection. Eventually, they came across an elderly woman sitting on the porch of a modest wooden house. Her silver hair glinted under the fading sunlight as she gazed out at the quiet village road. William approached her cautiously, pulling the letter from his pocket. "Ma'am, do you recognize this? It mentions my son. He might have stayed here," he said, his voice almost breaking. The woman studied the letter carefully, her brows furrowing as she traced the faded words with her finger. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. "Yes, I remember the boy you're looking for. He was here many years ago, but he left. He said he was searching for a new life elsewhere, and after that, we never heard from him again." Her words felt like a dagger piercing William's heart. His knees grew weak, and for a moment, he felt himself slipping into despair. The young man placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. The elderly woman reached out and gently placed her hand on William's arm. "Don't give up, sir," she said softly. "He may still be out there somewhere. Believe that fate will guide you to him when the time is right." A determined resolve. As they left the woman's home, William walked with a renewed sense of purpose. The villagers' coldness and the uncertainty of the search couldn't extinguish the faint glimmer of hope that had been rekindled. With every step, he whispered to himself, "I will find him. No matter how long it takes, no matter how far I must go." Psychological shock. After hours of searching in vain, William spotted a small house with a simple wooden porch. An elderly woman with silver hair sat on a wicker chair, her trembling hands holding an old palm leaf fan. She seemed lost in her own memories, her eyes gazing far away. William approached slowly, each step weighed down by fear and hesitation. Holding out the letter, his voice quivered as he spoke. "Ma'am, do you recognize this letter? My son, he once lived here. Do you know where he went?" The elderly woman took the letter, her aged eyes narrowing as she strained to read the faded words. She let out a deep sigh, one so heavy it seemed to carry the regrets of a lifetime. "This letter? Yes, I remember it. He stayed here for a time, but he left a long time ago, saying he was searching for a new life. Since then, I haven't heard anything about him." Her words hit William like a powerful blow to his heart. It felt as if the ground beneath his feet had given way. A mix of disappointment and pain overwhelmed him, leaving him speechless. His trembling hands clutched the letter tightly, as if holding on to the faint hope it represented. Comfort in the darkness. Seeing the anguish etched on William's face, the woman's expression softened with compassion. She gently placed a hand on his shoulder and spoke in a warm, soothing voice. "Sir, don't give up. He may still be out there somewhere, waiting for the day he can reunite with you. Trust that fate will guide you to him at the right time." Though her words couldn't completely ease his pain, they were like a small candle flickering in the darkness. William lifted his head, his eyes filled with gratitude even as tears continued streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Thank you, ma'am. I won't give up," he said, his voice shaky yet resolute. Final thoughts. Leaving the house, William stood still on the narrow village road, gazing at the lush green rice field stretching to the horizon. Where is he now? Could he have a family of his own? Maybe he doesn't even remember me anymore. Painful thoughts flooded his mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. The young man stepped forward, his voice gentle yet firm. "Mr. William, you're not alone in this journey. I'll walk with you to the very end. Don't let the past rob you of your faith." William turned to look at him, his clouded eyes glimmering with a faint light. "I've come this far. I won't stop now. Thank you, young man." They continued walking, their figures fading into the distance along the dirt road. But within William's heart, a flame of hope had been reignited. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but he knew that each step forward was a promise to himself. Never to give up. Expanded segment. The open ending, the river, and the memories. The golden hues of dusk blanketed the small river, its rippling surface mirroring the gentle waves of fading sunlight. William sat quietly by the riverbank, leaning on his wooden cane, his weary eyes fixed on the flowing water. Inside him, pain and hope intertwined as vivid memories of his son played like an old film reel. The innocent laughter of his boy echoed in his mind. But now all that remained was an aching void of solitude. The young man sat down beside him, silently offering his presence without pressing William to speak. He knew the older man needed this stillness to grapple with his thoughts and find his own sense of peace. William broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. "This river, it reminds me of when I used to take him fishing. He was so little but so full of life. It feels like just yesterday." His voice cracked, and he fell silent, the weight of his words trailing into the evening air. After a long pause, William exhaled deeply and straightened his posture. "I can't let the past hold me back. I'll keep moving forward, for him, for me. He's out there somewhere, and I have to find him." As he stood, the young man rose alongside him, offering a supportive arm. Together, they gazed at the horizon where the river disappeared into the distance. A faint silhouette began to emerge far away on the path ahead, a figure walking slowly toward them. William's heart pounded, his grip on the cane tightening. His mind raced with questions and hopes. Could it be him? Or is it just another stranger on this endless road? The scene lingered in suspense, the figure coming closer with every passing second. The journey wasn't over yet, and neither was the hope that fueled William's resolve. The appearance of a stranger. When William lifted his head, a figure appeared in the distance. It was a middle-aged man, his posture weary, and his dusty clothes suggested he had just endured a long journey. He walked slowly, his gaze fixed directly on William and the young man beside him. William felt as though his heart had stopped. His frail hands tightened around his cane, and tears welled up in his eyes. Could it be him? He wondered, unable to take his eyes off the approaching figure. The young man noticed the change in William's demeanor. Gently he asked, "Mr. William, do you think that's someone you know?" William shook his head, his voice trembling with emotion. I'm not sure, but there's something in his eyes. A fateful encounter." The middle-aged man drew closer. When he was only a few steps away, he stopped, his eyes carefully studying William. It seemed as though he, too, was trying to find something familiar in the older man's weathered face. "Sir, who are you looking for?" The man's deep, warm voice broke the heavy silence. William steadied himself, his voice shaking. I'm searching for my son. Many years ago he left home and I've never seen him since." The middle-aged man froze, his eyes flickering with surprise. He stepped closer, gazing deeply into William's tear-filled eyes. Your name is William, isn't it?" William nodded, his trembling hands gripping the cane even tighter. "Yes, I am William. And you? Who are you?" The middle-aged man stood silently for a moment, his gaze shifting from William's face to his thin, trembling hands. The stillness between them was almost palpable, broken only by the gentle trickling of the nearby river. The surprise. Suddenly, the middle-aged man spoke slowly, his voice trembling with emotion. I remember my mother telling me about a father who searched for his son for many years. And this letter, I saw it once when I was a child." William froze. What are you saying? What do you know about this letter?" The middle-aged man reached into his pocket and carefully pulled out an old piece of paper, identical to the one William was holding. 2 pieces of paper, fragments of lives that seemed impossibly distant, now connected in a moment of fate. Open ending, a flicker of hope. The river continued to flow quietly, the evening light fading behind the trees. William and the middle-aged man stared at each other, a profound yet uncertain connection forming between them. The young man standing beside them watched silently, his heart filled with curiosity and emotion. "Sir, I think we need to talk more, but perhaps I'm not the person you're looking for," the middle-aged man said, his eyes filled with sadness but also sincerity. William smiled, even as tears streamed down his face. "You may not be but this meeting, it's part of the journey. I believe every step we take brings meaning, no matter how small." The story pauses here, leaving a glimmer of hope. Could the middle-aged man hold a connection to William's son? Or is this another turn in a journey filled with pain, yet profound wonder? The journey continues, carrying unanswered questions, but one thing remains certain: hope is the light that guides through the darkness. Personal reflection. William's story is not just about finding his son, but a profound lesson in patience, the power of hope, and the significance of perseverance. Life may throw relentless challenges our way, but it is often the smallest moments, the faintest flickers of light in the darkness, that nurture our souls. I believe William's journey symbolizes the resilience to overcome pain and discover life's true meaning.